I wanted to make a short video taking a look at the trade deadline and how AJ Preller might be viewing the roster. I wanted to approach this by looking at the gaps that are in the lineup, or at least looking at possible positions that the Padres might be looking to upgrade at, and who might kind of be in the hot seat. I'm just focusing on position players right now. The starting rotation has been really good this year, and contract-wise, Preller will be looking to add or extend the starters, especially Joe Musgrove. But the starting rotation is the Padres' strength so far this year. While the bullpen could use an upgrade, it has a number of injuries and has at least been average so far. So let's take a look at the ideal starting lineup. This is probably what we'd say the starting lineup would look like if everyone were healthy. Machado and Tatis are locks. They will be starting every game they're healthy for. Cronenworth is a two-time All-Star second baseman, so I think he's a lock as well. I'm going to come back to Hosmer and some possibilities of shifting the infield a little bit, but I really want to start with the outfield first. Profar has exceeded my expectations going into this season. There was a big question mark in left field at the beginning of the season, but Bob Melvin and AJ Preller have left Profar in the starting position, and he's been all right. I don't think he's amazing, but he's definitely not a liability in left, and has slightly above average weighted runs created plus. So I think most people would be fairly happy to have Profar in left next year. What I really want to draw your attention to is that Profar has a player option for $8.3 million next year. Now, I can't imagine Profar not exercising this option, but it's worth noting that it's not guaranteed. We have the regular center field starter in Trent Grisham, who has had an abysmal year. Just look at his stats up to the All-Star break. A 192 average, only 626 OPS, and .7 WAR. A horrible WOBA and only 84 weighted runs created plus. And his ultimate zone rating has fallen off a cliff. Something's really wrong. This is a far cry from the Gold Glove center fielder from 2 years ago. Now Grisham is still young and is going into his first year of arbitration next year. A young, controllable center fielder with a Gold Glove in his past could be a valuable trade chip if Preller is looking to upgrade. Or, if the front office thinks that Grisham can figure things out, he at least shouldn't be very expensive with a horrible year heading into arbitration. Ideally, center field is a spot we'd want to upgrade, either by sticking with Grisham while he's cheap or looking for a replacement. Right field is interesting for the Padres. Will Myers has been the de facto starter, even through a rough 2022 until he was injured a little while ago. You can see his stats are not good, but this is also a much smaller sample size due to his injury. It'll be really interesting to see what Melvin and Preller do when Myers comes back from his injury, whether he'll be starting over Nomar Mazara. Myers does have a club option for $20 million that I don't think anyone in their right minds would take, so Preller's going to need a new right fielder for next year. And as I already mentioned, Myers already has some competition this year in Mazara, who's been filling in for Myers and has been making the most of his opportunity. He doesn't appear to be the best defender, but his hitting has been very nice. It's been a great addition to the team. It's not quite anything to blow your socks off, but in a year of anemic offense, his 129 weighted runs created plus, a 793 OPS, and 376 BABIP shows he's been one of the better performers for the Dads at the plate. But he is a free agent in 2023. Although I do think that Mazara would probably be happy to come back, given that the Padres have shown some faith in him starting in right field. So Profar and Mazara aren't guaranteed to be on the roster next year, and it makes zero financial sense to exercise the club option on Myers. And Grisham is severely underperforming in center field. I do think that this is where Preller is going to focus his efforts on strengthening the roster, either in extending or re-signing Mazara and Profar, possibly looking to deal Grisham, but this is also impacted by what happens in the infield. Tatis is one of the best players in baseball, no doubts, but he's been riddled by injuries, forcing Ha-Seong Kim to play a lot of shortstop. And Kim has played very well. He's playing very solid defense at shortstop with a 695 OPS and 102 weighted runs created plus, which puts him just about league average at the plate. And that's not a knock. A league average hitter is still solid. What's impressed me the most is Kim's across the board improvement versus last year at the plate. Just one example is his expected average versus fastballs. According to StatCast, Kim's expected batting average was just 216 in 2021, and it jumped to 271 this year. It gives me hope that Kim will continue to improve, and if he does, he makes a very compelling argument to be in the starting lineup. And this is where I want to mention that Tatis might be moving to the outfield. I think it's at least an intriguing option. The Padres have a pretty loaded middle infield with Tatis, Cronenworth, Kim, and CJ Abrams now in the mix. Tatis will be starting somewhere no matter what, but I do think it makes sense to move him to the outfield, or at least I think the Padres will be seriously considering it. Kim is good enough to be in the starting lineup, but he's never going to supplant Tatis at short. But it also feels like a waste to have Kim as nothing but a utility player. This has led some to think that Kim should be a trade piece, but since 2020, Tatis has only played in 58% of the possible games the Padres have played. Having a competent backup has unfortunately been a really important part of having Tatis play for us. CJ Abrams hasn't quite earned a starting spot yet. He's young, he's got time, but there's another reason keeping Kim and Abrams might work in the Padres' favor for now, and that has to do with Eric Hosmer. Taking a look at his stats, Hosmer is actually a league average hitter with a 102 weighted runs created plus, which is actually exactly what Kim has. There's two differences, though, between Kim and Hosmer. One, Hosmer is making 3 times Kim's $7 million in salary, and Hosmer is a really poor defender. There's no way around the fact that nobody wants Hosmer on this contract, other than Eric Hosmer and his agent. He's not the worst first baseman in baseball. He just isn't. But I would argue that he's the most overpaid. That $21 million that he's making this year fortunately drops to just $13 million in 2023, but Hosmer also gets his 10-5 rights, which means he can veto trades starting next year. And there's no way in hell Hosmer isn't exercising his player options, which basically means the Padres are stuck with an overpaid, overall below average first baseman, or they're packaging some players to basically pay someone else to take Hosmer in his contract. Neither option is enticing, but it is very painful to pay $21 million for .2 WAR, essentially a replacement player. Which brings me back to my point about Kim. If the Dads do end up trading Hosmer along with some prospects, we'll need a replacement. Luke Voigt is technically a first baseman, but he's definitely not a long-term solution at first base. I think the best option, other than maybe bringing someone new in, is to slide Cronenworth over to first, which opens up second base, which could then be filled by Kim if Tatis stays at short. Or we could end up with a middle infield of CJ Abrams and Kim with Cronenworth at first. There are already pieces for Preller to play with if he moves Hosmer, but first base is certainly a position where change needs to happen. I also want to talk briefly about catcher, mostly because Campusano is mentioned as a trade chip as well, but I think Preller wants to keep him, and I do too. Let's take a quick comparison of our two catchers. The first thing that immediately jumps out is that Alfaro is just better, by far. And this was totally anecdotal, but watching games this year, it really felt like base runners were running on Austin Nola quite easily. And it turns out that digging into the numbers, Nola is only in the 23rd percentile in pop time. He just doesn't have a very good arm. Now, contract-wise, Nola is more appealing with 3 years of arbitration left, but he's essentially playing at replacement level. And this is why the Padres have been linked to catchers like the Cubs' Wilson Contreras. But if you look at Campusano's AAA numbers, they are really good. Now, granted, Campusano hasn't been able to translate these numbers into success at the major league level, but I think it's hard to trade someone like Campusano when he could develop into a Contreras-like player within a year or so. I'd love to see the Padres upgrade Nola's spot, but we may not need to trade to do that. Of all the position players, I think the 3 with the hottest seats are Austin Nola, Trent Grisham, and Eric Hosmer. I don't think the Padres will bring in a first baseman to replace Hosmer if they do end up trading him, at least until the summer. If they manage to dump Hosmer's contract, I think they'll roll with Cronenworth at first. I don't think they will trade Grisham this July, but his play has opened the door to dealing him, especially if Tatis has already agreed to play outfield with Melvin and Preller. And I think Nola's in danger with Campusano right behind him as a prospect who could eclipse him as soon as next year. Or maybe Preller trades the farm for Juan Soto. Thanks for watching.